This show is listener supported. You're listening to Adoptees On, the podcast where adoptees discuss the adoption experience. This is Season 4, Episode 15, Peggy. I'm your host, Haley Radke. Today, we are once again focusing in on relationships. This time, we're looking at the challenges of adding a step-parent into your life. Many children navigate this in our society, but when you're adopted, this adds a new layer of complexity. We'll wrap up with recommended resources, and as always, links to everything we'll be talking about today are on adopteeson.com. Let's listen in. I'm so pleased to welcome to Adoptees On, Peggy Galdames. Welcome, Peggy.
Thank you, Haley. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited to chat with you. Why don't you start the way we always do and share some of your story with us?
Okay, great. So I was born in Seoul, Korea, 1976. And I was just actually looking through my original paperwork, which I have very little of. There really isn't very much information that was provided, but I was born, there was a midwife who attended my birth. And from there, I was handed over to a foster care home that had other adoptee or babies that were, I believe, were waiting to also be adopted. And my parents, who lived in Michigan at the time, they found me through a Lutheran agency that I believe doesn't exist any longer or has changed now. It was the David Livingston Foundation. They first actually adopted my older brother from Korea, also through the Holt agency, and then later, 3 years later, decided to adopt me. They wanted a daughter. So when I arrived to Michigan, I was almost 7 months old, and they were very excited to have me and my brother, and we lived in Michigan at that point for the next few years. And yeah, there's really not a whole lot of information about my birth parents. I wish I had more information, but I think that's the case for a lot of us. I know I was a really healthy birth weight when I was born, which was interesting because I'm a pretty small person, but I was almost 9 pounds as a baby. And when I came as a almost 7th month old, my mom said I was only about 15 pounds, which was pretty evident that I was malnourished. And she said I was pretty much just starving at the time that she got me.
And how much older was your adopted brother?
3 years older.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Why don't you go back and just talk about growing up? So your adopted brother is just a couple years older than you, and you're living in Michigan.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And so it was just the four of us, my mom, my dad, my brother, and myself. And then when I was 2 years old, my parents decided to separate, which then later turned into a divorce. And of course, at the time, I really had no idea what was going on. I had no sense of my family was splitting and breaking apart. My brother, who was 5, he definitely did. He had a lot of awareness and perception around that. And my mom told me that one day he came home and said, "Are you and Daddy getting a divorce?" And she was very surprised that he even knew the term. And she said, what does that mean? He said, when families break apart. So he got it. And they separated first to just, I think, give themselves space. And then it was really apparent that it wasn't going to work. And they both decided to go ahead and divorce. And my father pretty much, I think again, I'm kind of shady on the details because it's not something my family likes to talk about, but I think about maybe a year and a half later, he remarried. Maybe it was 2 years, but it was pretty, quote unquote, short after their divorce. And he remarried my stepmother, who is actually from Brazil, and she did not have any kids. And we did not live with them at all. We only saw and visited my dad occasionally. He still lived near in proximity to us, but we didn't live with him. My mom had full custody of us, and we lived with my mom. So here she was, a single parent raising the two of us. And I know that could not have been easy. it's not easy as it is now. And I can only imagine for my mom how challenging that was for her because of the circumstances of just all of a sudden having to figure out how to provide for us as a single mom. And my brother had at that time a lot of challenges for her behaviorally. And I'm sure a lot of it had to do with the divorce, but a lot of it also, I'm sure, had to do with the fact of just his own adoption experiences that were not, vocalized or talked about at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So we stayed with my mom until it was, let's see, I was in second grade, the summer of my second grade year. So I think I would have been 7 or 8 at that time. And my brother was going into 5th. And my mom she went grocery shopping. She left us at home with a babysitter. And I don't know how it exactly happened, but somehow she fell at the grocery store or at the parking lot. And she twisted so severely her ankle that she tore a bunch of ligaments and really just severely injured herself. And from there, she had to, get treatment, and she had an air cast, and she was not healing well. She was on crutches. It was a really physically hard and painful time for her. And, here we were, our age, and we were not very helpful. We were not, very responsive to having to do more. I remember her being very frustrated with us that there were things she wanted us to help with, and my brother was not at all interested in helping, and I kind of just followed in suit. And I'd help her sometimes, but I remember it was a hard time for all of us and a lot of frustration for her. And as a result of that injury and just the culmination of frustration, she decided at that time to reach out I believe actually she reached out first to her own mother to say, look, I need some help. And sadly, her own mom was not willing to offer that help that she needed. And so what she did next, my understanding is she reached out to my dad and said, look, I can't do this and I need help. And so she relinquished full custody of us to my father and my stepmother. And we moved that summer from, I think we were living at that time, I want to say we were living in Iowa. Yes, we were living in Iowa. And my father at the time was living in Illinois. And so we moved that summer from Iowa to Illinois. And I know I've intentionally cut out a lot of pieces of that move in my memory because I knew what was happening. And at the same time, I didn't fully understand why. And my mom to this day, she's 72, and she will forever, ever regret and tell me, I regret doing that. I regret that decision. I wish I would have never done that. It's one of the most painful things that she lives with. And she knows that that was something that can't ever be undone, because later when she wanted custody back of us or partial custody, I think she thought maybe it was just going to be a short-term temporary thing until she could get back on her feet, literally, and feel better. My dad absolutely did not want to give us back. He said, nope, you gave them to me, they're mine, and I'm not giving them back to you. And there were a lot of court battles that happened after that. And we never went back to live with my mom. Both my brother and I, together at the same time in the same way that we had prior to that, after that experience.
And originally, when she had full custody of you and your dad just saw you occasionally for visits, was that just because they had decided to move to different states, or like?
Yes, they did. And I believe that was for profession, job reasons. We moved a lot. I was realizing the other day that between the time I started preschool to my senior year in high school, I changed schools 10 times. I went to 10 different schools.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a lot of movement, a lot of disruption, a lot of inconsistency. And a lot of it, I know all of it was due to the fact that my parents moved a ton because of their jobs. My mom was a teacher, so she could readily find work wherever she went. And she felt that the places that she moved to were going to be in our best interest, for us. And likewise, the same thing for my father and stepmom. They were in the medical field, so work was very easy to find. And, again, in their mind, their moves were all, again, for the betterment of our family and what would be best for us as kids. I'm just not sure why they had to do it so much looking back, but it was not easy at times.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So they were living in different states for their jobs. And that was my understanding.
Mm-hmm. So you go to live with your dad and your new stepmother, who you don't really know. How does that go?
I don't think any of us knew what that new dynamic was going to be like. In my mind, the only reference that I had to stepmothers were from fairy tales, right? Cinderella, Snow White. And I remember telling my friend, I'm going to move and I have a stepmother. And she said, oh my gosh, is she like evil? Like the ones in the fairy tales? And I said, I don't know. I really don't know, but I hope not. And we had met I know we had met previously because she remembers, she tells me, the first time I laid eyes on you, you were 3 years old. And I was apparently pretty feisty. Like I was a typical 3-year-old. You want to do things your way. You don't want to have to be told what to do. And she told me that. So apparently she remembers me earlier than I remember her, but we never lived together with visitation when my dad had us. And so I didn't have a strong sense of who she was, the type of person she was, our relationship. And when we went to live with them, it was a huge adjustment for us, but in particular for my brother, because he was so angry at everything. And I remember he was not at all having it one bit with being there. And for me, I've always tried in my family to be the peacemaker and the one to make sure everyone was okay and taken care of. And I picked up on that right away that, like my brother doesn't like this. And I need to, even if I don't like it, I need to not make any waves. I need to be the one who kind of blends in and doesn't create any problems, because my brother was the one to do all of that. Mm-hmm. And so with our relationship, I know she went out of her way to really try and to make us feel welcome and to make us feel, cared for. And of course, she wanted to show my father that she could handle it, to be a mom. But I was thinking how hard that must have also been for her to be thrust this like immediate family dynamic. Here you go. You've never been a mom, and now you're going to be a mom. And on top of that, these kids aren't even yours. And on top of that, my son is like super angry about everything. So you get to deal with that. And my dad, I think, was just a man of his generation where he didn't get involved those kinds of like emotional relationships. It was left to the woman to figure out. It was left to the mom. It was left to the wife. He really, I don't know what their conversations were like. And I'm sure she reassured him, don't worry, it'll be fine. It'll be great. We'll make it work. And I'm sure he's, probably said something along the same lines, but it was definitely challenging. I remember, it's funny today when I was thinking about the things that we were going to potentially talk about, and this memory just resurfaced where we hadn't been living with them for very long, and they called a family meeting. My dad liked to do that often. Let's have a meeting. Let's have a family meeting. And he asked us, so, we're living, you guys are living here, and we're so happy to have you here. And, we love you so much. And Marion, who is my stepmother, Marion, she really, she just wants to make sure that you guys are okay and you're happy, and, and she loves you too. And so, we want to ask you a really important question, and we'd like to know, we really want you to be okay with this. And, would you be willing to call her mom? Do you think you could do that? Do you think you could call her mom? And even though I was only, let's say I was 8, my gut reaction kicked in, and I immediately felt, this is so wrong. Why are they asking me this? I already have a mom, and she's not my mom, and I don't really know her that well. And I I don't remember what my brother said. I'm sure he flat out was like, no. My brother is very direct, no. But I remember telling my dad that, I wasn't sure because I didn't, again, back to being a people pleaser as a young child, I didn't want to offend anybody and I didn't want any to be angry at me. But I also knew deep down in my gut it was wrong. And so I said I didn't know, and that I wasn't sure if I wanted to or not. So I tried to leave it like that. But I do remember, Haley, I've always been someone who's picked up on energy and the energy around me and the people around me since I was a little kid. And I will never forget the energy at that moment that she projected out. It was like something shut, something clicked, something was very unhappy. And I could tell my dad was unhappy. He was like, oh, I'm a little, I'm disappointed. Like I really want you guys to think about this. And she didn't say it. I mean, she was there waiting with anticipation and joy. Like we were just going to be like, yeah, no problem. Sure, of course. But because of how we both reacted, the energy shifted really quickly once we said what we said and, how we behaved. And it was like something just at that point was done. It was just done. And moving forward from there, my brother really, really never ever gelled with her in the relationship. And he ended up actually going back to live with my mom. I think it was probably 2 years, a year or two later, because it was that his acting out and rebellion was that bad. And for me, I just wanted to make things okay. I just didn't want to ruffle any feathers and, just try to do all the things that they wanted me to do and behave the way that I thought it was the best way to behave. And my parents were very, very, and they still are today, but it was a lot more, I think, strict, being the younger parents that they were, very religious. And they're part of the Seventh-day Adventist community. And so from the moment that we went to live with them, I mean, not only did everything shift, but like our whole lifestyle, what we were introduced to believe in, and to the way we were taught to think and what was acceptable and not. And, my mom, she was not, I mean, she's a religious woman. She's a spiritual woman, but, we didn't live that kind of lifestyle before living with my mom. And I felt like all of a sudden, all these demands were put on us. You have to do this, you have to go to church these days, and you have to behave this way, and you have to dress this way, and we only eat these things, and you're not allowed to do all these other things. It was a huge, huge adjustment. It was really hard.
So can you look at this from just the being adopted perspective? So you're adopted, and you come to live with your parents when you're 7 months old. So you already have that 7 month of, being in care. Mm-hmm. And then you're with your adoptive parents for a few years, and then with your mom, and then you're on your fourth situation here. Mm-hmm. And how does that mess with your head? I mean, this is I'm trying to picture myself in your shoes having to readjust to oh, and dad wants me to call her mom, so I'm getting my third mom here. Mm-hmm. That just, wow, my mind is kind of exploding.
Yeah, it really did mess with my head, because I felt, now that I have perspective and I've done my own internal work and really tried to find answers to why I acted and behaved this certain way. I mean, I know now I was angry at my mom, for my adoptive mom, for essentially rejecting me because she didn't keep us. And I hear this was the person that I was supposed to be attached to, who I was supposed to be able to trust, and who loved and cared for me like nobody else. Well, that once we were given to my stepmom and my dad. And here I have now another female figure that I'm supposed to attach to, but I know it's wrong. Like, I don't want to attach to her. That was it was such a mess. And what it did, Haley, is it made me want to keep searching for mother figures. So I would look to teachers. I would look to my friends' mothers and want to really just reach out to them and to be, I was like that kid that, I wasn't talking with the other kids. I was wanting to talk to the moms. I really wanted to like please and make sure that like, have them see, wow, what a good friend you have. Like, she's such a good friend. She's so nice. She's so helpful. And it made me never feel, for a long time, I didn't have that security in a mother figure. I still had contact with my mom. She wrote letters to me all the time. We talked to each other on the phone when that worked out. In the summertime, my dad eventually was okay. And I think because of the way work schedules worked, he would let me see her on the summer vacation time, which was a nice stretch, maybe like a couple months. And they would alternate holidays as well. So like, one Christmas with dad, one Christmas with mom. So it wasn't like I was completely cut out of her life. And she definitely went out of her way to be a consistent person for us for as much as she could, as time and geography allowed.
Mm-hmm. And you said your brother went back to live with her. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah, he did. He did for a while. He really just did not like my stepmom. That's really, they were like oil and water. Is that it? Oil and vinegar. Yeah, it was a very, very tumultuous dynamic, lots of problems consistently. And so it was weird. It was like going from being also having a sibling dynamic to all of a sudden being a single child dynamic.
Mm-hmm. And so when that happened, there's even more pressure on you to be like, oh, I'm the only one left. I really better be like, behave.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And I did. I wanted to meet those perfect child expectations. I don't think grades were such a big deal back then in elementary school, but I know that academically I wanted to do well. And I knew that church-wise, like, I wanted to like be that perfect girl that knew the scripture and memorized my biblical passages. And I was, in the choir, and I also learned how to play piano, and I learned how to play the flute. So I wanted to live up to being that really great kid that didn't create any problems, and was one that my parents could be like, oh, we're so proud of her. She's so easy, and she does such a good job. And that was, sadly, I think, a lot of the result of just the other things going around. And then when I turned 11, my parents asked me how I'd feel about having a younger brother. And I knew that they were trying to have another child, but it wasn't happening. And so they said, we'd like to adopt a child, we want to adopt, and we'd like to know how you feel about that. And I just said, well, sure. Whatever. Didn't really think much of it. I just thought, well, okay, if they have another child, then whatever. And my brother, however, was hugely impacted because they wanted to adopt a boy. And I think if they had said we're going to adopt a girl, that would have changed a lot for me. I think I would have questioned, like, am I being replaced? Or, what does this mean for me? I'm no longer the only child. Now all of a sudden I'll be the middle child. And so for my brother, he was that just like pushed him back even further from them when he knew that was happening. So what ended up happening was my stepmother, who's from Brazil, her brother worked in a hospital at the time. He was a surgeon, and there was a woman who came in and had a baby, and apparently on the spot, she didn't want the child. And so my uncle, called my stepmom and asked her, does she want this baby? And she said yes, which seems crazy to me, because that's not how it happens. Like, for most people, like, oh, here, somebody had a baby, they don't want the baby. Do you want the baby? Like, that's just,
Yeah.
so in any case, whatever they needed to do on there, and they did. So my younger half brother went to live at that time with her parents. Her, I guess it'd be the equivalent of my step grandparents, and they took care of him until she could get there and then bring him back.
So this all was happening in Brazil.
This all happened. Yes. So she left, she said, "Look, I'm going to go to get your brother, and it's only supposed to be maybe like 2 weeks." That's what she told us. And at that time, there was a lot of concern, which I'm sure it was rightfully so, around selling on the black market babies. And they thought that she was a part of that black market. What is the word I'm looking for?
Child trafficking?
Thank you. Child trafficking that was going on. And so what was in her mind supposed to be 2 weeks turned into 2 months of court issues, where she had to prove that she wasn't a part of that and that she was, in fact, there to legally adopt a child and bring him back to the United States. So it all worked out. She was able to do that and bring him back. And when I met my younger half brother, he was already a little over 1 year old, but he was 1. And my dad, that was the first time he met his son. And then a whole nother shift in our family took place, as it would with any new child coming into the family. But what ended up, I felt, happening for me was I had been the only child, the center, the focus for them, because my brother was not in the picture. And once my younger half brother came in, which was technically her son, we really shifted to take then the back seat. We became what I felt to be more of like the second class citizens of the home. And my brother, even though he wasn't there much, but I mean, I don't think he could have felt any more ignored and abandoned by my dad at that time, even more so. And for me, I hadn't changed anything with my behavior and certainly my efforts to make everything okay and be the great child that I thought I was doing a good job, but I wasn't hers. And that had always been an issue for her. And I knew this as I got older, the fact that I still refused. I never called her mom. I always called her Marion. The fact that, I had a very different relationship with her than my own mom, because even though my mom wasn't there, I still had a connection to her because she had been there from the beginning when I arrived. She and I had, and we will always have, a very strong connection to each other. And she understood and wanted to understand me in a way that my stepmother never did or never thought to try to understand me.
And what's the dynamic there that your stepmother solely adopted this third son, and like your dad didn't go down there with her? Like, did he adopt this son as well, like in the US, or how did that work?
Yes, he did. He very much wanted to be, obviously the father. And I'm not even sure legally what they needed to do, but I know that they were able to figure that out. I know my brother was naturalized and, they were able to make it all legit.
Okay.
But my dad didn't go because I was still in the country with,
right.
And he couldn't leave me behind, and he wasn't about to say, "Here, Barb, you can take your daughter back now," just while we go get our third child.
There's the replacements coming. So
yes, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Can you talk a little bit about the cultural dynamics of this? Because I feel like that seems to play a part in this too. Like, you're adopted from Korea, your stepmother's from Brazil, new brother is Brazilian as well. And what about your dad?
My dad's ancestry, I believe, is German.
Okay.
His last name is German. Yeah.
Yeah.
So quite the eclectic mix of a family.
Right.
It's interesting because even though she is Brazilian, she did make efforts to, I remember, incorporate parts of her culture with us. Like, for example, by speaking Portuguese to my younger brother, not to us, but to him, which he didn't really care for. He didn't try to reciprocate any of that. She didn't cook necessarily Brazilian types of foods or introduce like the Brazilian culture. I think honestly because she was so committed to being a Seventh-day Adventist
Mm.
and behaving as a good Christian woman and wanting to really conform to the American ways of what that was at the time for the church, that was really her priority.
Oh, wow. Okay. So it was more like the religious culture is what kind of took over.
Yes. Oh, 100%. Yeah,
Okay.
definitely. Yeah. And my mom did attempt several times for us to be introduced to the Korean culture, like with the Holt when we were in proximity, which wasn't always the case, but like the Holt family gatherings. I remember we went to one or two of those, and of course, she was like very interested in having us go to like Korean restaurants, and I think she took us a couple times to a Korean Methodist church, which was so weird. I was like, what are we doing here? And these women, oh my God, they would just fall all over their faces for my brother because here he is, this male, right? In the Korean culture, the male is like way more important than the female. And, didn't have any Korean parents. And oh my gosh, I mean, they would just fall. I mean, I remember I have this memory, this woman, my brother wanted something to drink and she was very quick to serve him. And she opened a can of Coke and put it in a bowl and, presented him the bowl and almost like fed him the bowl. And I'm like, can I get some water? Like, anyone? And it was the same thing too when we'd go to Korean restaurants. He would get served first. And he would also get, if there was a dessert that we ordered, he would get his own, but my mother and I had to share one. So, Korean culture. Yeah, I was like, okay. Can we not come back to the Methodist church, please?
Yeah, you got the short end of that stick. Wow. Okay, so just going back to your relationship with all of your different parents here represented, how did that go for you into adulthood?
Preteen, teenage years, I think regardless of culture and background, those are times that are challenging for both sides of it, child and parent. So I just remember there was a lot of challenges once I hit my freshman year in high school and probably leading up to that a little bit in eighth grade, where we basically were at each other, my stepmom and I, pretty much every day. And I think I was getting tired of the rules. I was getting tired of having to conform and be this like perfect example when I just wanted to hang out with my friends. I wanted to go to school dances and I wasn't allowed to do that. And my relationship with my mother, continued to evolve as well. And she really, I think, was just so tired and fed up with dealing with us. She did not like the fact that I still maintained a relationship with my mom. I remember there were times, well, pretty much consistently, almost every time that I figured it out. It like hit me one day. I was like, wow, every time I talk to my mom on the phone, she gets angry and she would give me the silent treatment. And I would have to try to like basically suck up to her to get her to convert her attention back to me. So it was total like mind manipulation.
Mm.
And and I remember we had this one epic argument where I basically just stated the facts, which were, I said, you don't want me to have a relationship with my mom. You just wish that, I would never talk to her again or see her. And she said, yes, I do. I do wish that. And my father, being the very non-confrontational man that he is, and always like he rarely ever spoke up for us and defended us. I looked at him and I was sobbing, and I remember saying, "Dad, are you going to say anything?" And he was like, "Oh, yeah, Marion, that's pretty harsh. Yeah, I don't think you mean that, but I mean, it was so heated and the damage had already been done. And so at that point, I think we all realized like this is not a healthy direction for any of us. And so my sophomore year, they sent me to boarding school. So it was at that point that I was then able to be, in my mind, free of them, her, and have the kind of relationship that I wanted to with my mom by speaking to her when I wanted to and not feeling guilty that I was talking to my mom and not feeling like I had to make amends with anybody for doing that.
Mm.
So my senior year came, and I decided, actually prior to my senior year, my junior year came, and at the end of my junior year, I decided that it was time for me to go back to live with my mother. And I'm not sure the urgency of that, because I love the boarding school. I love my friends there. One of my best friends was there, and something inside me said, it's time. It's time. You need to do this now. So I told everybody in the school and the administration. I just didn't tell my dad and stepmom that I was going to go move back to my mom's. And I was old enough per the court age to make that decision, and they couldn't say no to me. So I did just that. I left and went to go be back with my mom. And that was the first time that I had like decided that I could to live with her, since she gave us up when I was, 7 or 8 years old.
Mm.
And at that point, my father was not expressing his hurt and anger, but he decided at that point to pretty much cut me out at that point. And he was done. He was done with me. My stepmom had already been done. And the relationship just kind of shifted. So it was really just me and my mom again. But this time it was a huge adjustment because now I'm a senior in high school, wanting a lot of independence, having lived, quote unquote, by myself for 2 years and taking care of myself. And it was another big shift.
Wow. And so now as an adult, are you in relationship at all with your dad and your stepmom?
I am. We were not at all. I mean, we would barely have communication at that point when I left, up until 9/11 happened. And I remember thinking that just how our mortality is, and how really one day you're here, the next day you could just be gone, and that would be it. And I thought, what a tragedy it would be if I didn't reach out to them, and just try to have some type of communication. So I did. I called on that day, and I think they were really surprised. And I just decided, you know what, even if it's just me that's making the effort, I guess that's better than nothing, even though I was really angry and hurt about a lot of things. And it didn't really change much, honestly, until my kids were born. Once my daughter was born, my oldest, that's when I thought I could choose to not let them be a part of her life, or I could choose to really do that. And I thought, it's my own relationship is something that I absolutely have the choice and control of, just as well as having the relationship with them being grandparents. But my daughter hasn't done anything to deserve not having a relationship with them. They haven't done her wrong. They haven't, treated her unjustly. And this was an opportunity for us to kind of, I would not say I'll wipe the slate clean, but to have some semblance of a beginning of something. And we all knew it. We all felt it. We all were like, let's just not acknowledge all this other stuff. And let's just focus on the fact that, they're grandparents and I am a mother now, and it's giving me new insights. So we are in contact. It's strained at times. In fact, the visit we had even just 2 years ago, I finally got up the courage to talk to them about how I had felt growing up and being placed as kind of feeling like we really didn't matter. We were kind of second rate. As soon as my younger half brother came into the picture and talk about some of the other hurt. And it was my therapist at that time. She was like, you know what? They won't be able to hear you. I don't think it's a good idea that you should talk about this. And I thought, well, I'm not looking for an apology. I just want to get this off my chest because it's been eating me up that I'm carrying this forever. And what am I supposed to do with this? I just want to tell them so I get it off my plate. And I chose to do that. And she was 100% right as far as my father goes. I could have been talking to a wall. My dad he was so out of sorts. He didn't know what to do. If he could have just disappeared, he would have. My stepmom surprised me in that she actually said, I had no idea, even though I'm not really sure she did. And that she did say she was sorry, but it didn't really, it shifted a little bit of our dynamic, but not a ton, because even now to this day, I know that my younger brother will always come first in their eyes. And I've made my peace with that. That's never going to change. And you know what? I realized that I don't need it to, because that's not something that I need anymore. I don't need that. I have my own things in my own life with my own family and for myself that I can feel good about and feel whole and complete about. And that I don't need that from them in order to feel that way. As a kid, I needed that. I thought there was something wrong with me. I thought I was doing something wrong. I thought, why don't I get to be loved and given as much attention as him? But now, I'm learning how to make my peace with that and getting each day a little bit more comfortable and solid with the fact that it's nothing about me. It's all about them. And in fact, they're coming to visit next weekend. And I've been doing a lot of just, reminding myself about, how I choose where do I expend that energy? Is it really something that I want to allow old feelings to surface and to give that attention where it doesn't need to be? Or is it, you know what, I can look and focus on all the good and all the things that I have in my life and the things that I've worked really hard on myself to understand that, again, it's not about me. It's 1,000% on them.
Well, that's pretty good advice for people to think about, I think, if they're in a similar situation and have a step-parent relationship, or even if adoptive parents have separated and they're, with a new partner, just boyfriend or girlfriend, and just navigating that and, feeling sort of less than. I think that's a part of adulthood too, right? Like, well, that's on them instead of on us. So
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Is there anything that we didn't get to yet, Peggy, that you really want to tell us, share, anything before we do recommended resources?
Honestly, I just really appreciate being able to share my story, because I've never certainly talked about it in this context before with anyone. My husband knows, but in this way, I was thinking about it today, how there's something very healing and important about being able to not only share, but being acknowledged and heard, right? I feel like we all want to be acknowledged and heard, and whether we agree with what's being shared, that's separate. That's a completely separate thing. But to be heard and to be able to be acknowledged and to be able to share something that's so deeply been a part of your life and your DNA, that's huge. And
well, I think about that, coming back to that moment where your dad sits you and your brother down and asks you to call her mom, and you weren't heard in that moment, and that kind of set you up, all of you, for the next years ahead, right? I think that's a big theme there. they're coming in and assuming like, oh, of course, or, they're going to want to call you mom. You're the replacement. Like, and there's something so obtuse about that, coming to that. I mean, no offense to your dad and stepmom, but like, wow, that's a big ask. So yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. And I just, no, you're absolutely right. And I think that, what the work that you're doing here is, it's so helpful and it's so healing, and it really gives us pause to consider these kinds of things, these questions, and what's really like, what's important to us, and what it is that our journey, right, where it's all like coming together for us. And now I can just say that I'm so thankful for how my life has turned out. And it hasn't been easy. And there's still, I'm sure, many speed bumps ahead. But what I'm so grateful for, because even as rocky and tumultuous as my 3 apparent sets of rejection have been, and figuring out, who am I, and still at times trying to figure pieces of that out, I can only say that if it wasn't for those experiences, I wouldn't have such a strong sense of what is important to me as a woman and as a mother, and in having my own family, and how I really, really work hard. As exhausting as parenthood is, as you well know, I really work hard at not recreating any of those, what I would say have been mistakes and hurt for my own kids. And I want to really make sure that the imprint and impact and whatever legacy I leave behind, for them and their future generations, that it's one that's a solidly built one on a foundation of love and trust, because that is just so huge for children, and connection.
Yeah. And I think adoptees that have worked on healing are set up in a really unique way to be so very cognizant of that.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing. Okay. It is time to recommend some resources. And I'm going to start because, well, you are among one of my very delightful monthly supporters. So thank you.
You're welcome.
I literally couldn't do without you. That's the true story. But I want to bring this resource to you because one of our members in our community has started blogging anonymously. So I won't share their name, but they blog and tweet and have Instagram. And the site is called howtobeadopted.com. And it's so cool to see how this person has, I'm trying to be gender neutral. I feel like have I revealed too much just saying they're a supporter? I don't know. Hopefully not. I'm sure it's okay. This person has started out by, blogging their feelings and some of their different experiences. And now they're getting connected with a bunch of other adoptees in the UK. There's reviews on the site of events that this person has gone to, adoptee meetups, a play written and performed by adoptees. And there's a big kind of community kind of starting over there in the UK for adoptees, especially in London. And so if you're in that area, I think this is a great site to follow to make sure you're informed about those kinds of events. But also in general, another blog to add to your reading list, another great Twitter follow. I really enjoy reading these tweets, and I hope that doesn't come across as self-serving, because this person often will retweet things that Adoptees On has tweeted about, but it's not. They are really writing some very thoughtful things. They are navigating some very tricky situations in their own adoptive family, in their adoptive extended family. And I don't know how you feel about this, Peggy, but I really enjoy following day-to-day adoptee life sorts of tweeters because, there's these thoughts that I have daily that I think no one else but another adoptive person has this, or no one else but another adopted person would even have this situation going on. And it's one of those kind of accounts to follow. So I would recommend, follow at How to Be Adopted on Twitter and Instagram, and then also check out their website, howtobeadopted.com.
Wow, perfect. Thank you. I will definitely check it out.
Yeah. Okay. What do you want to recommend to us?
When I attended the annual Korean adoptee conference that was hosted in San Francisco, there were a ton of resources there for us Korean American adoptees. And there was one that I had just found out about prior. I had no idea that I would even find it there at the conference, but someone had posted in one of the groups about a movie, a film, a documentary, and it is called Resilience. And the woman who created it, I believe her name is Tammy Chu, and she basically documents the story of a Korean adoptee, a man who gets adopted, obviously from Korea, comes to the States. His parents are American, and he later decides to look for his birth mother. And my understanding is that that's very challenging to do that, to find any information, and let alone to even, once you get to the country, to be able to do that. So he ends up not only finding her, but reconnecting with her. And it was just fascinating for me to see this perspective of this man and what that was like for him, and being connected to a woman who gave birth to him. And it's such a heartbreaking, I don't know if I'm spoiling too much, but she was in a very desperate situation, and she was told that, if I remember correctly, that he was going to be given to a wealthy family, like a home, like a temporary situation in Korea. And they lied to her. And so she had been living with this daily grief when she went to get him, that, she had been deceived and tricked, and that he was gone and there was no way to find him. And so the fact that they were able even to be reunited, and just what that was like for both of them, it was just such I can't even describe the feelings that I had watching it. And so I know there's not a ton of Korean American adoptees probably who are listening to your podcast. Maybe there
are. There's lots of them. Are you kidding?
Okay, that's
There's
wonderful.
Tons of CADs all the time.
Fabulous. Good. But if they have not seen it, and it's not just obviously strictly for CADs, it's for everybody. But it was just such an eye-opening movie, and I really, really, really took it in. And of course, there were tons of tears. And I watched it with my mom, which was an interesting experience as well. But I would love to recommend that, because it was just a really well done, but true. Obviously, it's a documentary, and just it brought out a lot of really powerful things for me. So
that sounds awesome. Okay, so what was your mom's reaction? Did you guys talk about it after?
She obviously had a much different, I think, experience than I did watching it. My mom's really taken much more of a process, and then if you want to talk about it, we can talk about it. So she didn't really say too much. She was just like, wow, and kind of left it open for me if I wanted to talk about it with her.
Mm-hmm.
And I really didn't, although I did say it's too bad. My mom has certain health issues now that her travel is a lot more limited. And I just remember thinking and I think I might have told her too, Mama, it's too bad that, the time that you did offer to take me to Korea, I didn't take you up on that. Because if I ever did want to search for my birth mother, I would want to share that journey with my mom.
Yeah, I think I think often these types of things are very, very heavy for adoptive parents to watch. And especially when you hear something like, oh, and the biological mother was lied to, and this is not what they expected for their child. And then just for them to wonder, oh my goodness, what did I participate in? Was this any part of my child's situation too? And so I think it's interesting for you watching from an adoptee perspective and then an adoptive parent, just to think about your different reactions. I'm like, whoo, I want to this is me. This is my natural curiosity. Like, whoo, I want to look inside your brain and then look inside your brain and see what. Yeah. So anyway, thank you. Yes. Thanks for sharing that. That's really interesting. And I love that. I love documentaries.
Oh yeah.
Especially, I don't know how you feel. I'm a really big crier, but I've been in a season where I haven't cried that much. And then every once in a while I'm like, I just need to get some feelings out. So this is a good option for that.
Oh, yes. There will be tears. There will be many tears.
Okay, perfect. Okay, if you need a good cry, so it's called Resilience by Tammy Chu. Yes. Okay, so Peggy, thanks so much for sharing with us. How can we connect with you online?
Sure. I have 2 social media areas I hang out on. One is on Instagram, and I think that is under Peggy Live Well. And on Facebook, it's Peggy Galdamez. So I don't think there's too many Korean adoptees with a Salvadorian last name. So probably pretty easy to find me on Facebook. To find you.
Oh, yes. That's so great. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story with us and for sharing those ups and downs of relationship with your parents, your mom and your dad and your stepmother.
Well, thank you so much, Haley. I really appreciate you having made this platform for us and to just allow us, again, just to be heard and acknowledged. It's really powerful and wonderful. Thank you.
Oh, my honor. We have our fall pop-up book club starting very soon. So make sure you go to the Adoptees On Facebook page and click to request to join the book club group. You won't regret it. We're talking about an amazing book, and I can't wait for our live chat with the author that's going to wrap up our book club. So head over there right now. Links to the Facebook page are on adopteeson.com. I mentioned in the show today that Peggy is a Patreon supporter, and so is the author of one of our recommended resources. And we have just developed a real great community in the Facebook group. And so I am actually deciding that I'm going to be limiting the size of the Facebook group to ensure we have that close-knit feeling. And that means if you've been on the fence of joining Patreon, probably now is a good time to go ahead and go to adopteeson.com/partner and sign up, because the spots are filling up. And I want to ensure that we have a small, close-knit, safe space. And the best way to do that is to actually limit the number of people in the group. Please don't miss out. I would hate for you to come over and find out that it's already full. That would be so sad. Another way to support the show is just share this episode. Share this episode with someone that you know is adopted. Maybe they've navigated some challenging circumstances with their adoptive parents splitting up, adding a step-parent into their family. Share this episode of the show with just one friend, and that helps so much to build our audience. Thanks so much for listening. Let's talk again next Friday.